Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CC podcast, the podcast where I play video games and yap for the amusement of my girlfriend. I don't know what we are playing today, honestly. I didn't plan what I was going to play before I started recording. I probably will just do the easy thing and just continue playing Street Fighter 6 because when I played it for the previous video, really enjoyed it. And I got hooked back into it. So I will probably just do that some more. Additionally, I will say that I have come up with a better system for what I'm going to do for these videos because the process of, you know, planning out what I want to say and then recording the audio and then recording the video game footage and processing everything all within, a night or so that I can get it up for the next day was very draining when I tried to do this every weekday. So, new schedule is I'm going to record footage and audio one night. This is the night that I'm doing it. Then tomorrow night, I'm going to process and upload it. And I'm just going to go through that process, right? So that I'm not doing everything during that. Um, I have time to decompress, and I'm not doing this every night, and I have less of a deadline, less of a tight schedule, right? So not happening every weekday, but it will happen, pretty regularly. I'll say that. That's the situation for now, for the foreseeable future, right? Additionally, let's get into the topic, right? So starting off, for those that do not know, which is everyone that is not my girlfriend that is listening, I am black. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that, right? Because I'm very prideful about the fact that I'm black. I have what people describe as black pride. I want to talk about pride, right? What is pride? What do I think pride is? Because some people have an issue with it. They're like, why are black people allowed to have pride, but there's no like white pride, right? White pride is typically seen as a dog whistle for extreme right wing conservative Nazi ideology, right? Why is that? I would say that pride comes from success in spite of adversity, right? Gay people, they have pride because they have been a marginalized group throughout history, right? Black pride is because we are a marginalized group today throughout the world, right? And we have been for centuries now. We have other things like women. There's no like real official term of like female pride or whatever, but I mean, we're coming up on Women's History Month. That's essentially a Pride Month, right? Same way that there's a Gay Pride or Black History Month. And the reason why women get their own month is because women have been marginalized since the dawn of humanity, right? So that's why, right? That's why these like pride movements exist, right? And I don't think that anyone has a issue with particular aspects of national pride, and unless it goes too far, right? Like if someone said I have French pride, right? I'm French and I'm proud of the fact that we had the revolution and we killed all those aristocrats. It's like, yeah, that is something you should be proud of. You should be proud of your nation's history, blah 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 blah. And I wouldn't feel bad about that. I don't think that there's anything like wrong or untoward about that at all, right? But the issue becomes when we're talking about white pride specifically, not something based in your nationality or whatever. We're talking about whiteness. Whiteness is a colonial category, right? And so whenever we're talking about white pride, we're talking about having success in colonization, right? That you were that you are proud of your colonization efforts, right? That because that is essentially what being white is. That is someone that is on the successful side, the promise side, the benefactor of the colonial system that has been existing for centuries, right? Um, so like when you talk about white pride, like what exactly are we talking about? The pride that we have of enslaving people, colonizing people's land, committing genocides. That's the problem when we get into white pride, right? That's the distinction. Um, because as you know, people may or may not know, like whiteness is not something that has been defined, or has been stable throughout history, right? It's something that is ascribed, and it's an in group, out group category throughout colonial, throughout the colonial aspect of the world, right? The colonizing powers and the states that were colonized. That's why there are times that the definition of whiteness changed, right? Italians weren't always considered white. The Chinese were considered white in America. Why? Because it's based off of not the color of your skin or your country of origin, but it's based off of these shared values of colonization and who is a benefactor and who is a lesser, right? During the times where Britain was colonizing Ireland, Irish people were not considered white. They were lesser than, and so they were separated, right? That's how it was. Um, and so white is not a category of race per se, but it's a category of colonization. Someone is white is someone that is been accepted into the in group of being a benefactor of colonization. Um, so I think that is, an important distinction to have. Then we get into, Black pride and everything like that. Why I have pride of being Black. And I think that, um, I like the art, the music, the fashion, the history, all of it. I take very great pride in the aspects of my people, right? I had a conversation with one of my friends recently, right? And they had a question. He's Jewish, so he's not black. He was like, I'm not that much of a fan of gangster rap, right? And I said like, I get it, not everyone has to like everything, but I think that when we look at what that is, because people always talk like, it's promoting bad culture, blah 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 blah, it's promoting bad vibes. I look at it in the sense of, black people have historically been kept out of the traditional avenues of building wealth in this country. And so this embracement of the gangster archetype, this organized crime archetype, is an example of embracing the only aspects to build wealth that are available to black people, right? Like if being black is inherently criminal in uh, the United States, right? Our bodies are inherently criminalized, then we might as well embrace the criminal aspect of ourselves, right? And I think that that's cool, and I like that. I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think that anyone that has an issue with black gangster rap, black culture, that kind of thing, and how it's poisoning the youth and blah 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 blah. It's like, well, these things don't come out of nowhere, right? Black culture wasn't created in a void, and it's not something that we created, inherent in our genes. Rap and everything else that people might have an issue with. These things are cultural reactions, right, to the situation that we're placed in. And I think that, it's essentially like protest music. I think, same thing, right? When you look at, a lot of gay guys, when they do that voice, right? It's not that there's some kind of gay gene that gives uh dudes like a nasally like voice or whatever. It's that they decide to speak like that in order to separate themselves. Why? Because they know that that's like what is associated with them. They know that they're perceived already as being like foppish and annoying and lispy and all that kind of stuff, and effeminate. And so because of that, they're like, well, I'm just going to embrace it. That's like the voice that I'm going to do. Not every gay person does that, but a lot of them do, and that's the reason why they're embracing the the harmful stereotype and recontextualizing it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's the it's what happened with the N word, right? It's just what marginalized people do. There's this avenue that is used to harm them, and instead of harming them, these marginalized communities flip it on its head and they embrace it. They recontextualize it for themselves, and I think that that is a beautiful thing, right? So go through that, and when I talk about how being um black, is inherently criminal in this country. Also talking about, right, I think one of the ways that we look through and that this lens of colonization, how it manifests is in the word ghetto. I don't like the word ghetto. I don't like it. I don't use it. I like cringe whenever I hear that people around me use it because I like know what it means, right? And I have well, I want to be like I am the perfect arbiter of knowledge or whatever. But I do feel like I have an idea or like I have a thought of like what it means and my interpretation of it. I think ghetto essentially just means uh behaviors that are unacceptable in this white supremacist society, right? And so you look at what ghettos were, right? They were where immigrants were placed in big cities, where they were separated from the rest of polite white society. Ghettos originally were for, again, Irish and Italian immigrants. And then we get into that's where black people were placed, right? Once they were freed and they started moving into cities, they were also placed into ghettos. And once the Irish and Italians moved out, the black people stayed in because, of the financial stratification of the United States that keeps black people poor. So they're kept in the ghettos. And so when we're talking about what ghetto means, it's these people that were deemed unacceptable to be part of the white supremacist society that we all live in. And so when we say that someone is acting ghetto, that's what we're saying. We're saying that they're acting in a way that is unacceptable in a white supremacist society. And I think that, maybe we shouldn't be trying to uphold that standard, right? Maybe we shouldn't be trying to say that someone should uphold that standard, should be trying to meet that standard. And that's inherently what we're saying when we call something ghetto in a derogatory way, right? And so, um, I think at the end of the day, when we're looking at this whole colonization thing, I think the world is essentially just broken down into two groups. There's the colonizers and the colonized. And the colonizers, that's people that are white, right? And that is, like I said, it's a shifting category of people. And at the bottom of the ladder of this caste system is black people. I think when we look at who are the like harshest victims of colonization throughout the world, it is black people. And you know, there is the one drop rule is the thing that blackness is so inherently toxic or whatever that it spreads, and if you are have any aspect of black in you, you are black, because it's this uh is perceived as so bad that you want to avoid having any amount of it within your genetic code. And then, the other races are somewhere in that spectrum between whiteness and blackness in terms of where they are in the colonizer versus the colonized spectrum. Um, and so I think that is, I want to like make that clear before I get into, I want to make all those things clear before I get into like what I actually want to talk about. I think that, laying out my view of the world in terms of colonizer versus colonized, uh, what black people are inside of the system and everything, I want to make that clear before I get into what I truly wanted to talk about, right? And I think that is, my black identity, right? My identity as a black person, because I have so much pride in it. I would say that it is, if not the most important uh identity that I have, it is one of the most important ones, right? And looking at it, I think of what I would do, what I would rather lose aspects of my identity, rather than lose my black identity, right? So I would say losing my black identity, obviously I can't, become a different race or whatever. But I would say if I became like Candace Owen and I started cooning and, you know, sanitizing white supremacy and um, promoting white supremacy, I would have essentially lost my black identity. And it's one of those things. It's like, would I rather live the life of Candace Owens, or would I rather be trans and be a trans woman? Um, and I'm like, I think I would rather be trans than live the life of Candace Owens. Same thing with me being straight, right? Would I rather be live the life of Candace Owens, or would I rather be gay and like be some dude's bottom or whatever? I think I'd rather do that than live the life of Candace Owens. Like that's how much I care about my black identity, right? And so I think about that, right? And I think, you know, will black identity last forever though? That's the thing. Like when we think long term, not even like 50 years, I'm talking about like hundreds and hundreds of years. Do we think black identity will last forever? And, you know, I think the thing is, right, with both the one drop rule that people still subscribe to and, just the natural consequences of integration, at the end of the day, we're going to reach a point where everyone is black in America, right? Like because everyone is just going to become mixed and have black within them, right? And I mean, like Syndrome from The Incredibles, if everyone is black, then no one is, right? And so what happens then? And I think that, people do, I'm not the only person that thinks like this, right? Racist people like the KKK or, MAGA or anything like that, they think about that. That's why they want to limit integration. That's why they have such strong feelings about interracial marriage, that kind of thing, because they want to keep the white race pure and all that kind of stupid nonsense. Well, on the opposite end, right? There's like people like Dr. Umar, who their talk, about snow bunnies never keeping things within the race, that kind of thing. That you listen to what he says, and it's for the same reason, right? Because he wants to make sure that the black identity doesn't expand too far, right? Where other people can claim it that, he feels like shouldn't be able to claim it, right? Um, talking about Dr. Umar, I think that, I don't think that there's anything wrong with addressing the fact that there are a lot of black men that have self hatred and decide to run towards interracial relationships because of that. But I think that that is not an excuse to be someone that is essentially against um race mixing, right? I think that someone can love their race and also still be someone that uh enters into interracial relationships. Um and so I think like when we people that don't think that that is true, I think that that is what they're worried and concerned about, right? This idea that like black identity will eventually become lost because it's spread too thin somehow. Um, and so, but like when we get, let's think through, right? If the racists and Dr. Umar aren't able to have their way, don't achieve their goal, um, and say that we get to the world, everyone in America is black. All right, but then who gets to draw on black pride? Who gets to have black pride? Who gets to draw on the strength of African ancestors, right? And it's a interesting question, right? Because not every marginalized identity is going to suffer through this, right? There's always Women are always going to be born, no matter what happens. There's always going to be women. There's always going to be gay people. There's always going to be trans people, right? So those things aren't going to be like genetic out of existence, right? Or become so prevalent that there is no separation. There's not going to be a situation where everyone in the world is gay or everyone in the world is a woman. Though so there's no need to like think through like, oh, remember when we had to deal with men or remember when we had to deal with straight people? That's never going to happen. But there is a possibility, no, even if we're talking hundreds of years in the future, where we're talking about we have so many black people where it's like they're or we're 100% black, where it's like we don't even have to think about like, oh, remember when we were like marginalized and second class citizens? It's like might not necessarily happen, right? Like that might not be a thing. So, um, I think through, right? Um, Maybe it's just general pride, right? Maybe people just have general pride for human history. When we talk about like, instead of people's specific uh racial or ethnic history. When I think about ancient history, I like to think about ancient history. Obviously, I it's delineated by like which countries or whatever did what, but at the end of the day, I don't really think of it as specific uh specific like racial history or anything up until like 1400s do I get into like this is what X people did, this is what Y people did, right? Like I don't think when I think through like obviously when I think through like oh who invented paper like when I think through yeah obviously the Chinese are Asian, but I don't think of it in that sense. I think of yeah the Chinese invented paper, right? That kind of thing. So it could just be we get to a point where we just have just a general pride in that sense of this is what humans achieved, right? Um, and I think that that's the optimistic view. The optimistic view of we'll just get to a point where we don't care as much about what people what the race of people were and what the race of like our ancestors were, and it's just taking pride in just human development. But I think there's also a pessimistic view as well, right? And I think it ties into what I was everything I was talking about earlier, where I think the pessimistic view is that there's going to somehow be a realignment of the racial caste system where the colonizers and colonized are going to be redefined, and there's going to be essentially a new group of black people that are the people, essentially a new group that is on the bottom, whatever that may be. And whoever those people are, they'll be the ones that get to draw pride from black history and black struggle, right? The black struggles that we're dealing with now and have dealt with in the past. Um, even if they don't look like us, right? I don't know. Again, like I don't know what's going to happen 500 years from now or whatever, but it could, if some people get their way, they just there's a lot of black people that they just want to have white supremacy, but it's black people on top. So if they want to make it where black people are the colonizers and the white people are the bottom or the lowest of the colonized, and if that's the case, then yeah, someone with like white skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, they'd be the ones that would be able to draw on the strength of African slavery because they're the ones that are suffering through that process now, right? I think that when we're talking 1400s onward, when we're talking about the colonizers and colonized, it's the people that are being colonized that have to come together, that draw strength from each other, that kind of thing. I think that's why, like again, we talk about people like Dr. Umar or any of these other people that other like black people that want to say that we have nothing to do with what's happening in Israel right now. It's like, no, the Palestinians are colonized people. We are colonized people. The colonized people of this world need to stand in solidarity with each other. The same way that the workers of this world need to stand in solidarity with each other, the colonized people of this world need to stand together with each other against the colonizers. I apologize. So when we talk about that, when people say these kinds of things, it's just one of those things that like I don't know, it really um bothers me. And so like I do think, right, people such as people that are suffering from colonization, that are currently suffering colonization, they can draw strength from other people that suffered through colonization, right? I don't think that it would be inappropriate or anything for someone in Palestine to draw strength from Native Americans that suffered through the Apache Wars and being hunted down by the American military because the American military wanted this land, right? I think that uh, any Palestinians that wanted to draw strength from Geronimo, um, that would be completely fine, right? Same thing with, black people. Um, people talk about, how Martin Luther King got inspiration from Gandhi. Again, the Indians were being colonized by the British, the same way that black people are colonized by white people in America, right? And so, though we were able to draw from that and draw strength from that and work together and work on that in that same sense. So I when I think through um those things, I think that, we all need to recognize um what we are, um who we are inside of this like worldwide racial caste system. And yeah, I just think that I just want to, think through this is essentially just a thought exercise. I just had literally just a thought one night. I was like, what happens when everyone is black? Who where does that leave black pride, right? And hopefully those that like future generation will just, like I said, draw strength from who we are as people, but could also be a situation where we there's a new racial caste system, and when that happens, I mean, there will be new black people, and those people who are at the bottom of the racial caste system, they're going to be drawing strength from black people from before. Um, and I just think that's interesting to think about, right? Um, who knows what that will be? It's impossible to speculate, I think, at this point. I think, again, it's a situation that we're talking about like hundreds of years in the future. Black people only make less than 20% of the population in this country, so it's going to take a long time before, if we ever make it to 100% black. And by then, hopefully, things have changed in this country. And we'll probably all die from climate change and the climate wars before we even reach that point, anyways. So, yay. But yeah, that was just a that was just a thought experiment that I had. I just wanted to share that. I guess I apologize if it was really rambly throughout this entire episode. I was just thinking through like, oh, maybe this is the worst one I've done. I hope, and maybe it is. Hopefully, the next one will be better. But yeah, if you're my girlfriend, I love you. Please let me know your thoughts next time I see you. And if you are not my girlfriend, please like, comment, and subscribe, and try and make the world a better place. Thank you.